So I am not here, as you guys know, and we are at the beginning of this ecology chapter, so we really don't have enough to do a work day today. So we are going to have video notes. Awesome, I know. So we left off here in the notes on individual responses to the environment. So there are really two different types of behaviors. You've got your innate behaviors, which are your instinctive behaviors. These are really determined by genes with a bit of the environment, but it's mainly genes. So very similar among individuals of the same species. So you can get courtship behaviors of different birds, things like that. Then your learned behaviors are caused by an individual's experience in its environment. So it's something that they literally learn from their experiences. So there's a video up there. If you want to watch that, feel free. So some learned behaviors, we've got habituation, operant conditioning, imitation, and imprinting. So habituation is a behavior that is learned over a period of time, and typically it's to ignore a stimulus, so it's created out of habit. So a good example of that would be a scarecrow in a garden. So you place that scarecrow in. Initially, the crows are going to be afraid of it, and they're going to avoid that garden. But over time, they're not scared by it after time because they've learned that from a habit that scarecrow isn't real. So they do learn eventually, and then the scarecrow is not effective anymore. Operant conditioning is an animal is either rewarded or punished after a behavior. So a good example of that would be rats aren't able to vomit. Fun fact. So they don't often try new foods, but when they do, they will only nibble a tiny bit, and then they wait to see if it makes them sick. And then if it doesn't make them sick, then they know that next time they encounter that food, it is safe to consume. Imitation, individuals that learn behaviors by watching other individuals. So they know what to do from watching others. So for example, the picture up here, people in Great Britain had milk delivered, and the cap was just a foil cap instead of an actual plastic cap. But a bird figured out if it pecked through that foil, it can get to the milk. And then soon many birds were doing this because they saw this original bird doing it. Then you've got imprinting, which occurs when animals are young and they learn what their parents look like. So example, the duck example. So the egg hatches and the duck, sees it's usually the first organism that it sees. It will assume is its parent and will kind of form an attachment to that parent. And it makes sense from an evolutionary perspective because the vast majority of the time when an egg does hatch, the parent would be there. So that would make sense. Then we've got cooperative behaviors, which deal with members of the same species exhibiting similar behaviors in order to improve fitness. So there is a large fitness advantages to this. So spending times in groups will result in more eyes searching for food, more eyes looking out for predators. Group defense among predators allows hunting in groups to subdue larger prey. So here we have an example advantage. We have a queen bee and we have males. The queen bee, she's the only one that can reproduce. So all the males are able to help reproduce, but then they go out and they do the other jobs of the hive. Here we have, I forget what these guys are called, but they will surround, when there's a predator, they will surround the young and it will protect the young from predators. Among predators allowing for hunting in groups, so lionesses hunting for their food definitely allows them, if they hunt in packs, they're able to get larger prey. Some disadvantages when you are, in a group, you have to share that food. Being more detectable to predators. So if you're in a large herd, predators know where you're at. And then being susceptible to the rapid spread of disease. If you're living in a group, you're more likely to come into contact with other people's germs. So when these benefits outweigh the cost, then obviously cooperative behavior would contribute to a higher fitness level. Okay, so that's the end of that first section. We didn't have much to go there, so I am going to jump into this next section. So looking at energy flow. So we know that individuals need energy for growth, reproduction, and survival, which is essential to fitness. It is essential for evolution. So there are two strategies that have evolved to regulate energy acquisition and metabolic rate, and that's known as thermoregulation, regulating your internal body temperature. So there are two ways. So you're either warm-blooded or you're cold-blooded. If you are warm-blooded, you are an endotherm. You are able to regulate your own internal body temperature. If you are cold-blooded, you are an ectotherm, and you're relying on the external environment to regulate your internal environment. So ectotherms, they rely on the outside of meaning the environment. So that'd be most plants, reptiles, amphibians, and insects. So endotherms work with that negative feedback loop that we've talked about several times. And then ectotherms, they rely on their own behavior and movements from the sun to the shade to regulate their body temperature. So a net gain of energy is going to allow an individual to experience growth and reproduction. That could also lead to an increase in the size of a population. A net loss of energy results in the loss of growth or the loss of reproduction, which could lead to death, decline of a population, and, over a long period of time, maybe even extinction. And energy needs differ depending on if an organism is an endotherm or an ectotherm. But we can compare the needs by measuring the metabolic rate, which we would define as the number of calories that an organism burns over time while at rest. So we all have a metabolic rate based on the number of calories we're burning when we're just resting. So because endotherms maintain a constant body temperature that is typically higher than their outside environment, endotherms have a higher metabolic rate than ectotherms. Therefore, endotherms have higher energy requirements to feed their higher metabolic rate. So we typically, as endotherms, will have to consume more food than ectotherms would. So they can remain active over a wide range of different environments in order to eat a lot more food every day to provide this energy. So we are active more time of the day, whereas ectotherms really aren't. So the largest animals have the lowest metabolic rate on a per kilogram basis. As an organism increases in size, its volume increases rapidly, while its surface area only increases slowly. We know volume increases quicker than surface area does. So here you can see the relationship between body mass and total metabolic rate. So a elephant has a high body mass, okay, and it also has here a low metabolic rate. So as the numbers go up here, we get a lower on the metabolic rate. And as the numbers go up here, we get bigger on mass. Whereas a shrew, okay, has a high metabolic rate and a low body mass. So larger bodies have a small surface area. Smaller bodies have a larger surface area. So while larger animals require more total food, they require less food per kilogram of mass. That's an interesting fact. So energy availability will also determine the reproductive strategies of organisms. How often are they able to reproduce, and how are they reproducing? So many species of plants flower in the spring when rising temperatures warm the air and soil and more hours of sunlight are available. And this way, plants can generate sugars through photosynthesis. We know sugar is food to plants, so this would be very beneficial to them. So they're able, if they have more energy, they're able to make more flowers. Other species have evolved to initially put all their energy into their growth throughout the spring and summer, and then they're going to be the ones that flower in the fall once they've accumulated enough sugar throughout the season to make their fruits or flowers. Some plants, as we said, the corpse flower takes 7 to 10 years in order to produce a flower. So it's taking a large amount of energy gathered up over time to create that really big flower and that awful stench. Animals also time their reproduction to energy available. As we've talked about, we know that deer will mate in the fall so that their fawns are born in late spring. Therefore, there's going to be enough food available to them. Okay, energy capture. We know that some organisms obtain energy directly from the sun and from inorganic molecules, and others obtain energy from consuming other organisms. In places that have no sunlight, you may have learned before, there are organisms that can obtain energy from chemical compounds. This process is known as chemosynthesis. So organisms at the bottom of the ocean or in areas where light doesn't reach into the ocean, they actually can run on these chemical compounds that are in the ocean, like in the hydrothermal vents. So this is a cool video on that if you're interested. Trophic levels and food chains, which I'm sure you've talked about at some point, especially in your freshman year environmental course. But we've got autotrophs that can make their own food, known as producers, and then heterotrophs that cannot make their own food, so they must consume it. Other sources, so we call them consumers. So we are dealing here with a breakdown of organic compounds which are synthesized by others, which is catabolism. Heterotrophs are further categorized depending on what type of organisms they consume. So you've got your primary consumers, which are herbivores, and they have herbivory, so they're eating plants. Secondary consumers, they're carnivores. They primarily eat primary consumers. And then you got your tertiary consumers, which are typically carnivores that eat your secondary consumers. And obviously we have omnivores in there as well that could eat plants and animals. Trophic levels and food chains. So autotrophs and heterotrophs can be organized into successive levels that we call trophic levels. And these are based on these levels, we can draw food chains that depict the direction of energy and matter flow between trophic levels, which you see over here on the right. So we see kind of really a food chain and really a pyramid here, a biomass pyramid, and even you could kind of look at it as an energy level too. But we have the largest level here is the primary producer, which are the grasses. The next level, which we see in the orange, is your herbivores, and then in purple, your secondary consumers, your predator, and then your top level tertiary consumer. Some communities have 3 trophic levels, others have 4, but you're not really going to have more than 4 levels because of energy transfer. We know that the energy transfer is never 100%. Only 10% of mass from primary consumers is transferred to the secondary consumers. So this means that of all the energy available in the producer level, only 1% makes it to that secondary consumer level. So while a 10% ecological efficiency is a helpful rule of thumb, actual measurements of ecological efficiency generally range between 5 and 20%. So therefore, there's a limit to how many trophic levels can exist because there's only so much energy as we go up in those levels. So we got food webs too, which we know show many species interactions. I know I'm running out of time here. I only get 15 minutes on these videos. We have matter cycles. We can track the flow of energy. We could track the flow of these different matter, the nitrogen cycle, carbon cycle, phosphorus, sulfur, all of that stuff. Carbon cycle is a big one, and we will look at that in the next video. But I'm going to end this here, and we'll pick up more tomorrow. Thank you for watching. Have a great rest of your day.